Alright, we're going to solve some linear equations. So we're going to use our notes. We're going to use the step-by-step summary at the top of your notes to do each problem. So let's start with number 1. You can skip right down to step 3. For number 1, we want to collect all the variables. Since the two variables, the two x's, are on opposite sides of the equal sign, in order to move them, we're going to have to subtract or add. So we're going to subtract 4x on both sides. And the reason why I'm subtracting 4x on both sides is two things. I liked having the variable on the left, but more importantly, I like having the resulting variable be positive. So when I subtract out, the 4x's cancel out, or they zero out technically. 6x minus 4x is 2x, and everything else remains. Now this looks like a two-step equation that you did in Unit 7. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add 7 to both sides. These 7's cancel. I'm left with 2x equals, now negative 11 plus 7 is negative 4. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Those 2's cancel. I am left with x equals, well, negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. If I plug negative 2 back into the original equation, you can see that they will be equal. And you can see when I plug negative 2 in to both sides end up equaling negative 19, so that is the solution to that equation. So number 2, you can actually work from either side. You need to move the variables over to be on the same side first. I'm going to choose to move that negative 2 because I want the result to be a positive y. So I'm going to add 2y to both sides. That cancels. You're going to be left with 9 equals 6y minus 7. You could have moved the 4y, but you would have been left with a negative 6y on the other side. I'd prefer having positive 6y. But either way could get you the correct answer. So the next thing you're going to do is add 7 to both sides. So now this just becomes a two-step equation. Add 7 to both sides, and you're going to get 16 equals 6y. You're going to divide each side by 6, and y is going to equal, well, 16 6, but we can simplify that. They're both even numbers. You can cut both in half. Y equals 8/3. Okay, for number 3, we do need to go back to step 1. The first thing we need to do is use a distributive property on both sides. So I'm going to multiply each side by 4. So that's 4a minus, well, 4 times 3 is 12. Make sure that's not 4a minus 3, that's 4a minus 12. Equals, okay, distribute the 2 to both sides. 2 times 4a is 8a. 2 times 10 is 20. Okay, so now it's just like the last problem. We're going to move the variable. So I'm going to move this 4a. That way I keep positive a's in the end. So negative 12 equals 8a minus 4a is 4a. Everything else stays the same. I'm going to subtract each side by 20. I'm left with 4a here, and this is going to be negative 32. Last thing I'm going to do is divide each side by 4. And a equals 32 divided by 4 is 8, so negative 32 divided by 4 is negative 8. This is another problem that the distributive property just looks a little bit different. Instead of a negative, you can make that a negative 1 and distribute negative 1 times everything. So negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 3g is positive 3g. On the right side of the equation, the 2 is on the right side of the parentheses, but that's still just a distributive property. So 3g times 2 is 6g, plus 1 times 2 is 2. So now I'm going to move this 3g by subtracting 3g from both sides. They cancel. I'm left with negative 5 equals 6g minus 3g is 3g, plus 2. And then going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm left with 3g equals negative 7. I'm going to divide by 3, both sides by 3. So g equals negative 7/3. Alright, number 5 is a little more difficult. We're going to need to collect or combine like terms after we distribute. So let's first start by distributing the 4. So 4 times 3x is 12x, minus 4 times 4 is 16. But don't forget that 2x is still there. Equals, distribute the 6. 6 times 3x is 18x. 6 times 1 is 6. Okay, next, on the same side of the equal sign, I have two different x terms. I want to combine those terms. So 2x plus 12x is 14x. Everything else stays the same. Okay, now I need to move my x terms. So I'm going to move my 14x to make sure it's a positive. So you're going to cancel. Left with negative 16 equals 4x plus 6. Now if you decide to move the 18x instead of the 14x, it's a good chance you have it correct. Just make sure you're checking with the teacher to see that you did the correct steps. Okay, from here I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. Negative 16 and negative 6 is negative 22 equals 4x. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. So x equals negative 22 over 4, but I can simplify that. They're both even numbers. I can cut both numbers in half. X equals negative 11 halves. And the last problem. Same idea, I'm going to distribute first. So the 6 hasn't gone anywhere, so I'm going to write that in there. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. 2 times 5h is 10h. Equals. I can distribute the 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 6h times 2 is 12h. Now I need to collect some like terms. Well, on the left side, the 6 and the negative 8 can combine to be negative 2. Plus 10h equals 4 plus 12h. I'm going to subtract 10h from both sides. You have negative 2 equals 4 plus 2h. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. That gets me negative 6 equals 2h. I'm going to divide each side by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3.